General, thank you very much. CGS, ladies and gentlemen, I've been asked to explain the doctrinal underpinning of integrated action, which I'll come to shortly. But the context is, in case you're in any doubt, is absolutely multinational and joint and interagency. So although what I say is about the British land forces, I absolutely acknowledge how essential that context is. I would say there's been a long-standing tension in the British Army's tasks, doctrine, training, organisation, etc., between warfighting on one hand and stabilisation and counterinsurgency on the other. This was particularly, but not only, visible during the Cold War, when we faced a most dangerous threat of the Soviet Union and a most likely task of stabilisation and counterinsurgency. Conceptually, we tackled this, and we still tackle it now, by training officers and soldiers mainly for the worst case and adapting for the stabilisation tasks as they came around. These two types of conflict even had, or have, their own principles, the principles of war, which have stood since 1946, and the principles of counterinsurgency, for example, derived from the Thompson principles, which Thompson penned during the emergency in Malaya. But conflict since the end of the Cold War seems to merge what we might regard as operational or tactical level warfighting, so combined arms maneuver, with stabilization. That presents a doctrinal problem, or it does if you have a doctrine that says that these types of conflict are mutually exclusive. As an aside, in my opinion, this kind of conflict is not at all unprecedented. Arguably, this is what we've seen in other wars in history, particularly civil wars, which for the UK might include both the Boer War and the American War of Independence. Many of these conflicts are not pure insurgencies, as they include, or could include, stages of full-on combined arms maneuver against conventional or so-called hybrid forces. This challenge is exacerbated by the growing interconnectedness of people and things, the expansion of telecommunications and the internet, and with it the ability of actors in a theatre of operations to present their messages to a worldwide audience, present us with new challenges. Information has long been manipulated by those engaged or interested in a conflict to inform, counter-inform, deceive, and protect. Today and tomorrow, the proliferation of means and media of communication means that this dimension of conflict has much greater importance than it did, right down to the lowest tactical levels. Less mature at the tactical level, but clearly active at the strategic level, is cyber, or cyber warfare. We and our adversaries have long been able to conduct offensive operations in the electromagnetic spectrum through electronic warfare. But now the technology exists to infect our systems, closing them down or distorting or denying us data, for example. This is a threat to us at all levels. Whether it becomes a weapon available at the tactical level is perhaps another matter. The repercussions of use may be such that anything that doesn't have a localized effect may not reach the land component. Just because the technology exists and is relevant to operations doesn't mean to say that the power to use it is automatically delegated. But what's not clear yet is exactly what the doctrine will be in this area. Even so, the difference between electronic warfare and offensive cyber may become increasingly blurred in future, and it may well be something we can use. And of course, defensive cyber is definitely an issue right now. So how to think about this kind of conflict? Counterinsurgency doctrine points the way in some respects. It tells us that the enemy is not the only important actor. Indeed, he may not even be the most important. And so communication to the whole audience, focusing on specific actors, is a key thread to any effective campaign. Our doctrine of the maneuverist approach is informative too. That tells us that we should seek behavioral outcomes in relation to adversaries through a combination of physical and psychological effects. We seek to defeat the enemy in a number of ways, not simply aim for his wholesale destruction. Joint action, the UK's joint operational level doctrine, is also an important pointer. But it, to me, tends to focus on the use of air power, messaging, and diplomacy. We need something more usable by land forces. We need a doctrine that will allow the land force to engage in different types of conflict using a single approach that is adaptable to that particular conflict. That to say, both adaptable to different conflicts and the way that that given conflict itself adapts. That's integrated action. Written last year and published as doctrine in January, it seeks to be the conceptual toolkit to approach contemporary and future conflict. It starts by requiring an understanding of the so-called human terrain. This needs to be continuously updated. Specifically, we need to know who's in the audience watching and listening to us. Who are the actors in the relevant area? In attitude and behavior, these actors might be at various points across the spectrum, from friendly through neutral to hostile, even ourselves and our allies. Actively hostile adversaries, actively hostile actors are adversaries, and armed ones could well be enemies. Each is a subset of the other, so all are in the audience, for example. A key point is that the classification is not permanent, but it's not enough to know who and where they are. We want to know more relevant information, such as how they influence the direction of the conflict and how they are connected to each other, how we can alter or maintain their behavior. Of course, we still need to seek intelligence and information on our enemies and adversaries as well, and to understand the physical geography just as we always have. Then it requires us to look at the achievable behavioral outcomes for each actor, all under the eye of the audience. These behavioral changes are usually temporary. I'm not suggesting that we can alter the behavior of key actors in a region or city in any permanent sense. But when people stay at home or run away or plant a new crop or stand and fight, these are all behaviors. An important point is that this is not the same as their attitude. We seek to achieve these behaviors by having various effects on the actors. These are effects on physical capability, will and cohesion, and perception. We can act to achieve effects that can be positive or negative, depending on the actor. Some effects will have to be achieved vicariously by other actors because we can't achieve them ourselves. We achieve those effects by blending lethal and non-lethal actions, and we've grouped the things that we do that have direct effects on actors into 4 sets. The first is land maneuver, which comprises ground maneuver, getting into a position of physical and therefore psychological advantage on the ground, coupled with air maneuver, which is doing the same thing by air, with each enabling the other. Then joint fires, our own fires and the fires supporting us from the air and sea. This includes electromagnetic fires, such as jamming, that directly damage people or equipment. Then information activities, all our communication actions, all non-lethal. This includes information operations, communicating directly to audiences and actors, media operations, communicating to the media, who in turn communicate to their audiences, which are the same as ours, and managing how we appear, our posture, profile, and presence, and then our security and obviously deception. Finally, there's capacity building, a set of constructive actions, including security force assistance, the land force's contribution to security sector reform, which ranges from training assistance to partnering in combat. Also, our contribution to establishing essential services for elements of a population and military construction. The idea is that these actions and activities are blended at the operational and higher tactical levels by the land component and divisional headquarters. Sometimes one might be the primary activity supported by the others, any one. But when we apply all our capability, all 4 would be operating in concert. The intent is to match our doctrine to our operational requirement. I believe this approach is inherently flexible and it's adaptable. It will allow us to warfight, to keep the peace, and to do everything in between. in the 21st century environment. The challenge now is to operationalize it by updating the lower level doctrine and by getting it into training and education. We have started to update our headquarters, particularly at the divisional level, so they can plan and execute integrated action operations. We need to educate our officers in how to think and operate in accordance with this doctrine. The most important conceptual issues here are understanding the doctrine, of course, but ensuring that junior commanders can understand and anticipate higher commanders' plans and intent. And we need to make sure that they can operate accordingly, acting aware of the likely consequences of their actions. The most important capability issue here is the need to develop non-lethal capabilities, and you will hear more about this from Alistair Aitken, Commander 77 Brigade. Integrated action is new in the sense that the Army has not had a doctrine quite like this before, but really it reflects and codifies a common sense reality that draws on our experience and has deeper historical roots. That's a common sense that tells us there are many more relevant people in a theatre operations than just the enemy, and these people and those who watch us play a very significant part, perhaps the most significant part, in conflict. Thank you.